Jeremy, how am I coming through for you, buddy?
Perfect.
Okay, well, I'm assuming if I can hear Jeremy, then we've got other audience members here also. So this is the Direct Consumer 101 session. Are you ready for Direct Consumer? And of course, this is for the Craft Beer Professional Fall Virtual Conference 2020. So if that's the session you're trying to attend, you have arrived. So I imagine we'll have a few people to kind of trickle in over the next few minutes. And we'll go ahead and start with a couple of introductions before we jump into the meat of it. But my name is John Kelly. I'm the CEO and one of the co-founders of Craft Peak. And today with us, we have Jeremy King, who is the Chief Solution Architect and one of the co-founders of Crafted ERP. And we'll be introducing both companies here in just a moment. Before we do, I wanted to provide a little bit of an orientation around these sessions. Today is the 101 direct consumer session, but we will be having two more sessions, both at 3 p.m. Eastern on Tuesday and Wednesday as well, which will be a 201 session and a 202 session all around direct to consumer and e-commerce. And guys, really what we're trying to do here is we are working with a number of breweries and beverage companies, and we get a number of questions related to e-commerce and direct-to-consumer. This, of course, has been an increase in those questions and these strategies over the last 7 months in particular. So really what we're trying to do today is share the conversations and the questions that we get from breweries all the time in the hopes that this information is helpful for others as you're making strategic decisions. So today we'll focus on a high-level overview of what is direct-to-consumer and e-commerce and what is the opportunity there that exists for beverage companies. Tomorrow, we will be doing a deeper dive into once you make the commitment to go e-commerce and direct to consumer, chances are you're going to be putting your product in packages. So we're going to do a whole segment on packaging and fulfillment. So the 3 fulfillment methods typically associated with e-commerce and direct to consumer. And then on Wednesday in our final session, we're going to be doing a deep dive into the metrics. So Crafted ERP, Jeremy and his team have a phenomenal access to a great number of metrics and financial data related to the cost of what it takes to brew beer, package beer, all of the costs that go into that. What we're going to bring from the Craft Peak side is the revenue and sales data. And when you put those together, we're really going to be sharing with you some of the gross margins that you should expect in each of your sales channels, how to calculate those, and really to determine for you when you're considering your e-commerce and direct-to-consumer channels, is the juice worth the squeeze? What do those margins look like? What is the real cost associated with it? So that's what we're going to be doing today. Once again, the overview. Tomorrow we'll talk about packaging your product and the fulfillment methods associated with e-commerce and direct-to-consumer. And then on Wednesday at 3 o'clock again for our final session, we'll be diving deep into the metrics and go from there. So once again, John Kelly, CEO and co-founder of Craft Peak, Jeremy King, co-founder and chief solutions architect for Crafted ERP. Just to give you a little bit of background on each of our companies, Craft Peak is an Asheville-based technology startup. We started about 5 years ago. And essentially, we designed Craft Peak to work and align ourselves with great craft breweries, understand their core business challenges, and then develop technology solutions to address those challenges. And much of our focus over the last 5 years has been directly with e-commerce and direct-to-consumer for those breweries. And really, at the end of the day, we're trying to help our breweries evolve and change the way they market, sell, and the way people buy beer. Jeremy, I'll turn it over to you here for a brief description on Crafted ERP.
Perfect. Thank you, John. Yeah, Crafted ERP is a true all-in-one solution for craft beverage manufacturers. So we've got 3 main additions, brewery, winery, and distillery, with the idea that we're providing basically every user in the organization access to a single set of, version of the truth. So everywhere from sales, production planning, the actual execution, the brewing of beer, packaging, lab, QC, all of the different components that go along with that, and then managing, every other aspect and being able to tie in with other systems, in terms of direct to consumer, point of sale, being able to bring all this in seamlessly, so you've got one place where you can manage the entire business. That's about it.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Okay, guys, so we've got about 40 minutes left in this session. We also want to keep this very interactive, so if you have questions that pop up, we will be kind of manning the questions and comment section of this. And if it looks like there's a pertinent question related to one of our slides, Jeremy is going to interrupt and we'll address those questions. So feel free to ask. But we've got a lot of information to cover today, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. All right. So what is digital transformation? First of all, I've got to give credit to this slide to Christina, who's the VP of Marketing at Ecos. She provided a presentation that I saw maybe back in February of this year, and I just thought this cartoon displayed it almost perfectly. It's, digital transformation is years away. I don't see our company having to change anytime soon. Well, that might have been the way that we were thinking about things, in particular in the craft beer industry. And here you have, COVID-19, that's this ultimate wrecking ball that's just, swinging towards the building. So I know that most of our craft breweries aren't in big corporate buildings here, but I think that this was much of the mentality before the taproom closures that happened about 7 months ago. So really, as we explore what is going on with direct consumer and with e-commerce in our industry, I think it's important to kind of take a step back and look at this from a different perspective. So I'll ask the question, what does your brewery and Nike have in common? Well, one of the most interesting things I find about Nike is that it was a brand that was started in 1964. Everybody's familiar with Nike. Their sports apparel, their gym shoes. Well, what does that have to do with e-commerce? What does that have to do with your brewery? Well, just like beer has been brewed for thousands of years. People have been showing up to drink beer. Well, that model changed when legislatively and regulatory wise, we had to shut our tap rooms down about 7 months ago. So, it was a massive disruption to the way that we typically engage there. Well, if you think about Nike, Nike was developed in 1964, way before the internet, way before we had things like Amazon, way before we had the ability to buy things online. But yet today, they remain one of the most popular brands in the world, and it's a brand that's growing. So they just closed out their last fiscal year. They're about a $40 billion company, and over 20% of all of their revenue now comes from their direct-to-consumer channel. So here you have this business that is making gym shoes, traditionally has nothing to do with technology. And some people might make the same argument for a brewery. Hey, we're brewing beer here. We're not a technology company. But what Nike's been able to do is leverage technology to create a more direct consumer relationship. And through that have now created the most quickly expanding portion of their business. So $12 billion worth of shoes last year were bought through their direct consumer channel because they've created a unique connection. And now they've provided ways to kind of monetize that connection. And what Nike is doing with this now is using that technology to kind of blend the online experience and the real world experience. And that's essentially what we're trying to do. Breweries are great at creating that real world experience in their tap rooms. Now it's about leveraging technology to create that extension. And I think Nike happens to be a great model for that. So, all right, so from there, if we're going to define e-commerce and direct to consumer for beverage companies, it's really pretty simple. It's about finding beer online, being able to search and find what you're looking for, being able to buy that. So you're actually going through the transaction online also. And then it's a fulfillment method. How do we get it to the customer? Well, that's either a direct fulfillment method or through a third party. And we'll just go ahead and identify these three fulfillment options today. And remember, this will be the second half of the session that we're going to do tomorrow. And the 201 session is getting deeper into each of these fulfillment options. So, but just from a high level, when we're talking about e-commerce and direct to consumer for breweries, we're really talking about curbside pickup, local delivery, and shipping being the fulfillment options, with curbside pickup meaning that you can either have kind of a scheduled time that you're going to buy something in advance and have a scheduled time that you're going to pick something up. It can be more on demand, where I'm buying it right now, I'm going to swing by in the next few minutes. Local delivery can be where you're converting taproom staff to delivery drivers, or you're using a third-party delivery service. And shipping, of course, is where you have now pickers and packers putting things in boxes, taping the boxes up, putting a label on it, and shipping to someone. So those are the three fulfillment options that are typically associated with online and direct to consumer. Okay, so the DTC revolution. What are the forces that are at play here? Well, as I think that this is another area where we in the craft beer space have a tendency to get very narrowly focused. A bit myopic when it comes to what is going on in our industry. And when you have scary things pop up or unsettling things like COVID-19, we have a tendency to even hunker down a little bit more and get more focused. So guys, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about what's going on globally that is influencing our market and the e-commerce and direct-to-consumer forces in our market. And I think we're going to show that this has been an acceleration of things that were already in play, as opposed to the development of new things as a reaction to COVID-19. So we'll take a big step back and we'll look at what's going on with e-commerce and direct-to-consumer globally. We're also going to talk about some shifting consumer demands that come into play here that are relevant to all of us. And then, of course, we have some specific effects related to COVID-19. Those are both challenges, and there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt associated with COVID, but as often it happens, where there are challenges, there are also some opportunities that are unique to this industry. So we'll talk about those things. So to get into it, let's talk about what e-commerce is doing globally. And this is important because, once again, the global economic forces also play an important role in our specific market or industry. But e-commerce globally is $4 trillion. It represents about 14 to 18% of the total global retail economy. So this is a huge number. And not only is this a huge number right now, that basically 1 in 5 things that are purchased via retail throughout the world is purchased online now. This is also a trend that's accelerating in its growth. So it's growing at about 25% year over year at this point. The other thing here is Amazon. So, it's tough to talk about e-commerce in any sense without mentioning Amazon. And the reason is that it's a $280 billion company as of 2019. And Amazon, for most of us over the last 20 years, was the proof that we like to look for things online, we like to buy them, we like to go through that transaction, and we love to have those things show up in smiling boxes 2 days later. So it is, and if you look at what's happening with Amazon this year with the advent of COVID-19, you're seeing that in the first 6 months of this year, they're already $164 billion in sales. So they're already on a run rate that has them, close to $360 billion this year. So a huge increase from where they were last year. So I think those are important to look at. And then what we can see there also is that there's a distinct change in the consumer relationship with manufacturers. So this is another trend that we're seeing, is that U.S. manufacturers are now about 40% direct to consumer. I'm dating myself here, but when I was a kid, there weren't many manufacturers that were even considering direct to consumer. So this is kind of a new trend, and this is an accelerating trend. So all of those things are kind of happening on a global scale. Now, what are some of the other indicators that we look at as we're advising breweries? Well, because I think it makes a lot of sense to take a look at what's going on in the grocery and food business. And what we see in particular in 2020 is there's a lot of motion here. So we just talked about Amazon, but and Amazon's up 48% or something like that. I haven't run the math, but it looks like it's kind of in that neighborhood this year over year. Well, Amazon Fresh, their grocery delivery service, is up 160%. You have consolidation of third-party delivery and final mile delivery systems. So you're seeing consolidation with Uber Eats, you're seeing Grubhub, you're seeing Postmates, you're seeing Instacart go out and raise additional money for their $14 billion valuation. You see DoorDash ahead of their IPO raising $400 million. These are all things that have occurred, all of these things right here in the last 6 months. So there's a huge amount of financial focus. There's a huge amount of energy to consolidation around these things. And what that's really saying is that money and smart investment is proving to us that there's something going on here with these third-party delivery systems, because consumer demands have changed. We want stuff delivered to our door. Fast food has been around for, let's say 50 years. Well, fast food is no longer fast or convenient enough for us. We're willing to pay additional money for convenience, so that 20 minutes that we run out and go pick up fast food, we are now allocating to things that are more meaningful for us. So I think it's really important that we look at, the fact that consumers want stuff delivered to our door. We want to buy things from people that we care about. We're more discerning about where our products come from and who's making those, and the thought and the core values behind that. And we're willing to pay for that convenience. So these are all things that come into play in our market. And we'll dive into those a little bit deeper here. But other things to look at, guys, if you looked up subscription programs right now, there is a proliferation. These things are absolutely exploding. So whether it's wine clubs that you're participating in, if you want your razors delivered, if you want your coffee delivered, if you want snacks or groceries delivered, if you want your wellness, all of it can be delivered in a box or a subscription now. And if you did a quick search, and I did this a couple of weeks ago, of like, top subscription services, you're going to see list after list after list of subscription services that are popping up right now. Well, why are all these subscription services popping up? I can go to the store and get a razor. I can go to the store and get coffee. Well, it's not the way that we're used to buying things. Now, what we want as consumers, once again, we want that convenience. Once we've found something that works for us, we want it delivered to us on a regular basis. So, everybody's kind of caught on to this. This is the new model, and that's just kind of what's happening here. But whether it's food, clothing, beauty, fitness, wellness, entertainment, arts and crafts, hot sauces, I would challenge you to find any retail item that you really couldn't get in a subscription service right now. So, so once again, guys, these are the changes that we're seeing. So kind of the global forces here that are occurring in e-commerce in general. It's booming. It's continuing to boom. More people are going direct to consumer. More manufacturers are going direct to consumer. Online marketplaces are exploding. Consolidation of third-party delivery systems, lots of money being spent here to now get those items from our e-commerce systems to our doors. And then everything else that we want convenience-wise is now being packaged up as a subscription product for us. Okay, so what does this look like for the regulated beverage industry? Well, our friends at Sovos and Ship Compliant put together this map, recognizes some of the leaders there for sure. And I think this map is pretty telling, because what you're going to see is all of the kind of the dark blue areas are wine only. You've got some red areas where it's absolutely prohibited for any alcohol direct consumer sales. And then you've got beer in light blue, and then all alcohol in green. And the thing that's kind of stark and jumps out to you right away is that there's a lot more opportunity for wine than there is beer and other spirits. So, and there's lots of reasons for that. There's different regulations between beer and wine. And you have the California Wine Institute that for the past 15 years has done a heck of a job consolidating efforts around their lobbying efforts and legislative efforts to change these laws. But I think it also presents the opportunity that beer and other spirits have here. So if we do a quick breakdown here of what it looks like in wine versus what it looks like in beer, well, direct-to-consumer wine is legal in 46 states. It is a $3.2 billion industry in 2019 that represents about 11% of volume or 15% of value, which means that you have a huge amount of volume that's now being sold online and delivered directly to consumers. But what's interesting about that is it's 15% of value. So it is higher margins. It is higher profitability that you're getting from that 11%. We're also seeing that this market growth is starting to slow down a little bit. So in 2017, 2018, it was growing about 15% year over year. Last year, we saw a growth rate around 7.8%. So you have industry analysts out there that are kind of citing the fact that maybe this is a slowdown, or perhaps a slowdown in the growth of the direct consumer wine market. So something that will be, we'll keep an eye on. But certainly there's a huge difference between what's going on with direct to consumer sales in wine and what's happening in beer. And just for the sake of contrast, let's go through the numbers there. These are a little bit more difficult to pull all together. But we know that the U.S. craft beer industry is about $23.9 billion in 2019. Less than 1% of beer is estimated that was sold online direct to consumer. What we're seeing across all of our customers, and we're out there talking to a lot of other folks that are working with a number of breweries and reading the industry reports, we personally are seeing about a 400% increase across our customers related to their e-commerce and direct to consumer channels. And for many of our breweries, this was something that when COVID first hit and tap rooms were closed, they said, we need to get something in place as quickly as possible that's going to replace or supplant our tap room revenue. What was really interesting about that is about 3 to 6 weeks after that point is where brewery ownership was coming back to the table, and they said, guys, we missed the boat. This is not just a stopgap measure. This is a permanent shift to our strategy moving forward. And we've got a number of breweries that are now committing to 30 to 50% of all of their volume, for the foreseeable future. And this is kind of a permanent shift to their business model. Is going to be sold online. We've got, a number of breweries that, are kind of minimum 11%. We've got some breweries that are, we've got some breweries that don't have tap rooms, and they're all virtual, and they're selling 100%. So anyway, all that to say is that there's been a huge increase in the usage of direct to consumer, and there's been a huge demand for it on the consumer side as well. And once again, contrasting wine versus beer, 9 states are available for direct to consumer shipping for beer. Okay. So,
hey, John, real quick, before you keep going, we got a question came in that says, do you see the brewery guilds / breweries banding together like the wine industry to pool resources to enact change?
Man, great question, Jeremy. Not sure who that came from, but man, I'm glad somebody asked. That is a tricky one. And we're going to be doing a webinar in a couple of months that is going to be specifically related to some of this, because everybody's trying to figure this out right now. I will talk to you, or I will mention maybe some of the differences between wine and beer right now to answer that question. So first of all, the majority of wine producers at one point were kind of in California, and they were able to kind of organize in such a way where they knew that most of the wine was coming from California into other states. And if everybody could band together through their professional organizations, they would be able to then have enough lobbying focus and effort there. So that is the hope that we will continue with our individual brewery guilds and the National Association to be able to have significant influence on legislation that will impact. And we're already seeing that in Kentucky and other places where these laws are starting to get chipped away at, and we believe that they will continue to do that. But the other thing that's influencing this is not just on the legislative side from the lobbying efforts, but also we're talking about the consumer demand on the other side. Well, if you think about how things happen legislatively, certainly the lobbying effort have some effort or have some influence, but it's also the consumer demand. So now that we're getting beer delivered to our doorstep for the first time, and we've got 8,200 breweries out there that are looking to adapt their business model, it's going to be very tough to justify putting breweries out of business and taking this away from consumers. So I think that there is a path to increasing the direct to consumer sales opportunities for beer. And I think it's going to be a matter of, it's only a matter of time before that happens. Certainly, the more organized we get at the state and national level with our efforts to lobby, the more influence that we're going to have, and the better and probably more expeditiously those changes will occur. So that's how we kind of see that. But yeah, Jeremy, any other questions there?
Not yet. We can keep going.
Okay, cool. Thanks, guys. All right. Yeah, great question, though, guys. All right, so let's break down the challenges and opportunities now specifically related to COVID-19. So we've talked about the global macro forces. We've talked about consumer demand shifting in all of the things we buy. Now we're saying, okay, well, we've got to make beer meet those demands of the consumer. Let's talk about COVID-19. So the challenges associated with COVID are obviously taproom closures, limited capacity. Social distancing will remain in place for kind of an unforeseeable and unknown amount of time, but we know that our businesses look different than they did 7 months ago, and I think we all have a sense that looking back 2 years from now, there's going to be a tremendous shift associated with this. So those are the challenges. If you were a heavily taproom focused model that and your taproom got closed and you didn't have an e-commerce strategy or direct to consumer strategy, that was really challenging. So, but there are some opportunities associated with this, and it has to do with some of the laws that we're talking about here. So when some of these COVID-19 restrictions were put in place, there was also in concert with that, a temporary relaxation of some of these alcohol laws, which provide us in many states the opportunity to kind of participate in these channels and to have that beer fulfilled in ways that you wouldn't be able to kind of prior to that. So it'll be interesting to see to what extent these laws spring back in place, but very much in line with the question that was just posed related to wine. Okay, and then the increase in direct-to-consumer demand. Well, we've got this shift now in consumer demand. Everybody's home. They're connecting through Wi-Fi to your brand. This is an opportunity now to kind of meet that demand. So once again, extending that experience that you've created and the brand loyalty that you created in your tap rooms now to your web properties and allow those transactions to occur in a new and different way. All right. So what is the reason that direct to consumer would work for your brewery? Well, why would you go about this? Well, we've talked about some things already, but let's just kind of put them on paper here so that we can kind of summarize it. So if all of a sudden I am taking my beer and I decide to go through a distributor into a retail account, and then all of a sudden I'm taking that beer and now I'm going directly to consumers, you would, I think everybody out there would appreciate that there are potentially additional margins that would be at play for your brewery. And what we'll do is dive into these numbers with the help of Jeremy and team, but it's really an opportunity for you to take on more of those margins associated with your business. And that's pretty obvious to everyone, at least that we talk to from a brewery perspective. Everybody's aware that when you kind of remove the middleman, there's more margins to be had for the manufacturer. But it's the next two pieces here, the direct connection and consumer experience, that people don't often associate with their direct consumer channel. So I'll give you, for instance, here. So I'm going to walk into your brewery. When I do that, and under normal times, I'm going to have your bartender or bar staff greet me. They're going to find out what kind of beer styles I like. They're going to make a recommendation. They're going to pour the beer. I'm going to watch that. I'm going to smell it. I'm going to taste it. I'm going to give instant feedback. Well, that's also a direct consumer channel. And what you've been able to do is not only serve me as a consumer directly, but you've been able to get that data from me, that customer feedback directly, which goes into then influencing and provide strategic insight for your business. And what styles are you going to make next? What amenities are you going to offer as a brewery? So it is so important that not only do you have the ability to sell directly to your consumers, but you also have the ability to gain feedback and critical insights from your customers. And with those insights, you have the ability to then customize the experience. What we're finding and what data out there is telling us in other industries, and I'm not trying to offend any brewers here, but at some point, all IPAs are going to get pretty similar. All lagers are going to get pretty similar. And if you make it much easier for me to get one lager versus another, and they're about the same, we're going to go with the one that's easier. And I've noticed this in my own consumer behavior and that of my wife's, where we've got a bunch of favorite breweries here in Asheville, but we find ourselves not with any conscious thought, but gravitating and spending more money at the places that are making it much easier for us to get the beer that we're looking to. So it's almost more about how we're buying things and how those things are fulfilled to us as it is what. And you, as a brewery, have the ability to now differentiate yourself against the other 8,000 breweries out there by having a better consumer experience that provides better access and consistency. That's much more in line with the way I buy everything else. So I think those are the things that are really important from a direct consumer perspective. And the other things here that we need to talk about from a business perspective is if you're heavily taproom focused and your taproom gets shut down, that's really tough. So this is a diversified, durable, and repeatable sales channel that is not constrained in the same ways that your taproom is. Like, you might be able to make more margins in your taproom, but if I've got a taproom here in Asheville, North Carolina, I've got to be here in proximity during the hours that you're open to be able to participate as a customer. If you launch an online store, all I need is internet access. It's open 24/7, and you can get me beer anywhere. So I think that quite often we don't think about the additional sales capabilities of this diversified channel and the fact that it's more durable than taproom by itself. And then the fifth one here is ability to expand your market. So if you are a popular brand, have popular beers, and there's a market for those things that are outside of your geography, it's a great way to be able to satisfy that need. Okay, I'll wrap it up here. So online sales, pre-sale beer releases, bottle and membership clubs, subscription services. These are all examples of kind of what direct-to-consumer and e-commerce look like for breweries. We know that breweries are selling a lot of other things. Our breweries are selling tickets and private events and tours and merchandise and all kinds of stuff. But what we're really talking about on the direct-to-consumer and e-commerce side of things is, the revenue associated with beer and typically the revenue that was lost from taproom. So it's really the online sales where I'm going to go buy a 4-pack of 16-ounce cans, and I'm going to pick that up Thursday after work. Pre-sale beer release would be where you've got a big beer that everybody's really excited about it. Instead of having people stand in line, you release it ahead of time online. People are able to buy the beer and then have it fulfilled by the brewery. Membership clubs and bottle societies. This is typically an opportunity for you to sell memberships. Typically, they're annual memberships, so you get both the cash flow associated with the sale of those memberships, and then also releasing beer to your now your members, selling it at full retail. And it's a perfect way to recognize and reward your top consumers. It's a perfect way to develop a more intimate relationship with your top supporters. And then subscription services are really more of a mechanism, but I put it on here because we see this happening more and more in the UK. And in the UK, direct to consumer has been going on for a lot longer comparatively with the US. But what we see over there with our clients is now the introduction of mixed packs and subscription services, so you can get that case of beer on your doorstep, every month. And just like the Amazon model, as I get my dog food, it's going to show up when I need it. So that is a mechanism that we're starting to see more and more here in the beer world. Allocations of subscriptions have existed a long time in the wine industry. So this, once again, there's nothing new here. It's just that we're starting to see an evolution and a shift as we're specifically kind of focused in beer. Okay, from there, Jeremy, I think it's probably time to hand it over to you, unless there's any other questions. Let's shift at this point and let me know if there's anything that's come in for us.
Oh, perfect. I don't see any other questions coming in, but we'll give everybody a little chance to type that in. And to ask a question, please just enter that into the comments section. It should be in the upper right-hand corner of your browser. Doesn't look like any are coming in, so I guess we can move on to the next slide here. And if I see any coming in, we can jump in and get them addressed. But certainly join us for tomorrow. Tomorrow we're going to do much more of a deep dive, specifically going into kind of we talked today about the why of getting into direct to consumer, and obviously it makes a lot of sense. And John did a great job of describing, why you should be looking at something like this. Tomorrow we're going to jump into the how and really jump into some of the numbers behind that in terms of the differences in margins between, selling a pint in your tasting room, between actually canning, bottling, crowlers, other things like that, and actually selling it, because the additional cost of packaging, the additional cost of actually going to market, delivery, the actual cost of sales to it, and really get an idea of what you should be making on any of these. And then on part 3 of our session, we're really going to be diving into the longevity of each, kind of taking a look at all of this in a kind of a post-COVID world. We did have another question coming in here, John. It's how is the compliance, which is the tricky part for out-of-state DTC? Not sure. Yeah. How is the compliance?
Yeah, well, it's there's a couple of different levels of compliance, certainly when you're considering direct consumer. And what we'll be doing tomorrow afternoon in the second part of our session is really focusing on those fulfillment mechanisms. And guys, we could have an entire presentation just about shipping beer, because there are a bunch of nuances there. So I want to try to be informative, but not dive into the details here too much. And know that tomorrow afternoon we'll be dedicating some time specifically to shipping. If you guys have additional questions beyond that, certainly reach out to it at Craft Peak. We've been given a number of presentations about this, and we have some materials to pass along to those folks that are interested. But it is tricky because first of all, you have to identify the states with which that you want to participate in. And just because they're a state that allows a direct consumer shipping experience doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be the best beer market for you. So once again, you have to start with kind of the business objectives. What are we trying to achieve from a business objective standpoint? Then what are the states that would allow that type of relationship? And then say, okay, well, these are the states that I want to get to. Now, if it's one of those 9 states that allows that, basically the process from there is that you'd have to get registered with the state as a direct consumer shipping permit. So you become a direct consumer retailer in that state. And then there's going to be additional registrations, probably with the Department of Revenue for that state. And then there'll be ongoing reporting associated with that. There'll be volume restrictions, excise tax, sales tax, things that you have to report back. But there's basically 5 steps that you have to jump through, or hoops that you have to jump through, or steps that you need to take. But it's really that. It's kind of deciding the state. It's then getting certified to basically participate in that state. Then it's lining yourself up with a carrier and getting approved for your beer to be authorized by that carrier, which is usually UPS in the majority of the US. Some additional options in private couriers or GLS if you're out on the West Coast. And then it's the ongoing reporting associated with that compliance. So that's the type of stuff that we'll go over in a little bit more detail tomorrow, but that's what it looks like to basically get involved from a direct to consumer shipping perspective.
Great. Any other questions, please add those to the comments section. And if not, we can always address them on tomorrow or on Wednesday's edition of this, each day going a little bit in more detail into some of the concepts that John covered today.
Okay, Jeremy, I think might be out of slides here. Do I have the right slide?
Yeah, it looks like it.
Okay, cool. All right. So I think this is my last slide, Jeremy. Were there others that you were going to be sharing today?
No, I think we're going to cover all of that particular piece tomorrow. Yeah,
okay.
You did a great job in terms of covering the why, and tomorrow we'll jump into the how.
Okay, sounds good. Well, guys, I think at this point, we've got just a few minutes left here, but I think once again, to talk about what we're trying to cover for tomorrow's session, it's going to be everything. So once now you've made the commitment to go e-commerce and direct to consumer, and once again, this is distilled down from the hundreds of conversations that we're having with breweries. We would, once you decide e-commerce, there's a lot more flexibility when your product is in packages. So whether you're delivering it to someone, whether somebody's coming to pick it up, or whether you're putting things in boxes and putting labels on it, chances are you're now moving in a packaged direction. So we're going to talk about everything that you need to know about canning. So we'll do that in the first half of the session tomorrow. And then in the second half of the session tomorrow, that's where we're going to dive in on some of these fulfillment channels. And that will be curbside pickup, local delivery, and the shipping that we touched on here just a minute ago. And then in the final session, what we're going to do is do a deep dive into the numbers and really talk about, okay, so now that you're committed to this, there's many breweries that we find that have either struggled to get their e-commerce system dialed in. They might be going through their third or fourth iteration of different tools, maybe, ripping out and replacing a point of sale system, adding an e-commerce system, switching all of that up. It's run the gamut, and this isn't pointing fingers at anybody. I think that what we're trying to do is say, listen, this is tough. Nobody's got it completely figured out. We're learning every day, and what we're trying to do is pass that information on to everybody else so that it can be useful. But if that sounds like a scenario that you've been in, just rest assured that there's a lot of other people that are trying to figure it out as well. Just keep working at it. And I hope what we're able to show you over the next couple of days is not only how to go about that, but then also to measure the results. Because what we find is a lot of breweries are participating in some of these things right now, but they're not really sure kind of the profit or margins that they're making out of it. They're doing it because that's what they know to do. Tap rooms are closed. They were left without any options. But now let's help you guys get dialed in on some strategies that are going to be very effective for the business. So that's really what we're looking to accomplish in the next two sessions. Okay, looks like we did get one other question in here real quick, so we'll answer that one. Yeah.
The question, this sounds like it's right up your alley there, John. How ideal are e-com sites like Shopify, WooCommerce, Square, etc., for alcohol DTC?
Man, that is such a good question. Nobody's got it nailed. That's what I can tell you. And a part of that is also because a lot of the fresh demands that were placed on your business are now new demands that are on technology companies like ours to go figure it out. And there's a lot of nuances and special capabilities that you need with technology for beer sales that are really not needed other places. And a couple of those things are like, if you have a popular beer sale, man, you're going to get huge spikes in traffic. And, if you're out there just buying, T-shirts or underwear or socks, these aren't demands that typical e-commerce systems see on a regular basis. But, if you're working with a popular brewery, you might be able to sell out, a few thousand beers in the first couple minutes of a sale. And that's a huge technology consideration. The other thing is that if you really think about what an e-commerce platform is, well, that allows you to basically advertise your products and for people to kind of put those in carts and check out. That really doesn't handle much of the fulfillment. So you still have to be able to get your product to somebody. So it's not only about advertising those products, it's also about having the tools that you need for staff to pick and pack, to manage these orders. You need something that ties back into to inventory so you can manage the inventory. So all of these are considerations that live outside of the e-commerce system that need to kind of work with the e-commerce system. So it's not as simple as pointing to any one solution and saying, that's the one you got to go with. It's going to be different for everybody. So that's the downside here, guys. We can't give you some magic bullet or some special formula that's automatically going to work for everybody. But what we will is give you a way to think about it. And it's going to come down to your strategy. What are your business goals and the customer experience objectives you're trying to achieve? What is the data that you need to make sure that everything's on track? I want to make sure I've got my sales data. I want to make sure that we're in compliance. I want to make sure that I've got the appropriate information going to my team so that they've got the information they need to fulfill orders. And that data is going to help me customize the experience. So we're going to be talking about over the next 2 days all of the things that need to fit together to make this successful. Certainly an e-commerce solution is part of that, but that can't just be looked at in isolation to determine if you're going to have a successful e-commerce program. Is really how all of these things are coordinated to achieve the ultimate business goals is really what we're going to be after. And that's what we're going to teach you in these sessions.
Yeah, John, I'd like to add to that just a little bit. I mean, you mentioned the wine industry in terms of direct to consumers or direct to consumer. It's a very mature industry, and in that industry, which we work with a lot, there are a ton of options for very specialized DTC platforms that incorporate a lot of these different strategies that John was talking about today. Some of the subscription models, certainly the membership clubs, etc. Because it's been so limited in terms of where you can actually sell direct to consumer, especially crossing state lines within beer. John, I think you said it was 6 states in which we can actually sell in currently. There hasn't been, or 9, there hasn't been that focus, I think, from technology companies to really enter into the market to come up with these really unique solutions like you've had over in wine. So I think we're just at the cusp of this, seeing companies like Craft Peak and stuff really starting to focus on having DTC specifically for beer. And they're going to be building out very specific functionality that I just don't think that you're going to get in the Shopify or WooCommerce, which are much more, kind of traditional, I'm buying something and having it delivered. It doesn't take into consideration necessarily all of those compliance aspects. So it says, hey, per household, I can only buy up to 6 gallons of beer in a month. Or they've got some really unique compliance things, and you're just never going to get to those on what I would just continue. I mean, they're great systems. I mean, don't get me wrong, but they're really not focused on that industry. And there's a lot of specific functionality I think that the beer industry needs that they're not going to be able to provide.
Yeah, that's exactly right, Jeremy. That you nailed it. And wine is ahead of the game, but wine also has unique demands that aren't part of our craft beer demands. Also, there's I can tell you that the beer sales that we do that are high volume, high impact beer sales are like nothing that we've seen kind of from the wine data. And Jeremy makes a great point. And then you're not able to kind of, on some of these systems, if you were going to try to sell online and fulfill, well, are you delivering to dry counties? How do you make sure that you've got folks that are 21 and up? How do you make sure that you didn't cross over some of those volume limits that are going to, be a problem for you in the states where you've applied to be a direct to consumer retailer? So there's lots of considerations here. And there's lots of nuances. So, and I know there are lots of breweries out there on all of those platforms that you ask about: Shopify, WooCommerce, Square, etc. And I can tell you the pros and cons to each of those from their experience. But that's part of the opportunity here. Also, is to take a look at this, try to figure out what is important to your brewery, and then develop the technology stack that allows you to achieve that. And that's really what we're going to be diving into in the next couple of days. We got 1 minute left here, guys, and we can pick up on this tomorrow as well. But we got a question in at the end that said, what do you see as the biggest barriers to entry to selling beer online? Quite honestly, it's probably going to be packaging. It's, can you get your beer in cans? And I think that's probably a great setup for our session tomorrow, because if you don't have it in cans right now, you're limited to your options. If you've got availability to get your stuff in packages or cans, now it opens up the world a little bit to you. So I think that's one of the top ones that we're going to talk about tomorrow. And then once again, it'll be like, do you have the capacity? Do you have the technology to support this? Does your team have what they need? And do we have an opportunity to do this safely for both your staff and customers, and be able to kind of support that customer experience that you're trying to design?
Oh, and you got one more coming here at the tail end.
Okay, what do you see breweries doing today to get their brand in front of new potential customers as they expand into more states? Marketing. You want to drive e-commerce. You need a good marketing strategy. And the good news is, for a lot of breweries out there, you probably have fans and people that want to connect with your brand and buy your beers in other places. So how do you go about identifying those and reaching those folks? We'll be talking about that a little bit this week also, but absolutely, if you've got staying power with your brand, and it's about letting people know where their options are now available to get their hands on your beer. So things like, having a great web presence, maybe having beer finders that point people to your retail accounts so you can support that sales channel. With your direct consumer sales channels, make sure that people know what the options are, and based on where they live, how they can get your beer. Okay, guys, well, I think we're a minute over here, so I'm going to be a little bit careful. I know we've got 2 more sessions this week, so if any new questions come in, we'll start off with those tomorrow. But really appreciate everybody's attention. Andrew, we are excited to be participating in the Craft Beer Professionals Conference, so thank you for the invite. I hope that this was informative for you, and I look forward to our next couple of sessions together. But yeah, if we didn't get to your question today, please hit us up tomorrow. And anything that we get in between, like I said, we'll review at the top of the agenda tomorrow.
Or Wednesday.
Or Wednesday, absolutely. Be here all week. Well, through Wednesday.
Great. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, guys.